I have Adam Stetzer on the phone.
Afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday.
Today we are going to talk about how to do a web site assessment or a web marketing assessment. We talked about this a couple sessions ago, and we had some feedback that people wanted to see how we do a website or a web marketing assessment for a direct client. So I wanted to take you through one that I just did as an example for today. So what I will have this available for anyone to download afterwards, but I have a sample online marketing recommendations document that I put together. And you can see here that I've got our logo. I have the client's logo, Hill and Pond, PA, and the date and my contact information. Contact information is always important because if someone wants to hire you, it's right there for you to call them.
Hey, Chad, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't see your screen, and a couple other folks can't either.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, folks. Just one sec. Yeah, there we go. Much
Okay.
better.
Try that again. So I'll cut that out of the first part of this. So today I wanted to walk everyone through the online marketing assessment, and I have a sample document here that I've put together, and I wanted to show you how I assembled this. And then, of course, as we go through this, if anyone has suggestions on what works for them, let's keep it interactive. Let me know what other things people like to see in these types of documents. This document will be available for everyone to download after the meeting. So starting off here at the title slide, as I said, I always put our logo and the client's logo here and my contact information. The next slide, and just to kind of set this up, typically what I'm looking for is this is someone who may have contacted us and is interested in having us work with them on online marketing. And so we want to have a good initial meeting. This may be before a proposal. This is especially for a bigger potential engagement where it warrants a little bit of upfront work. And so what we usually ask for is access to their Google Analytics so that we have a chance to review what's going on their website today so that we have a better understanding of what kinds of things we might recommend that they do. So with that being said, the first slide I have here is basically an analysis of where is the traffic coming from. I'll pull up Google Analytics so that everyone can see kind of how I get this. In Google Analytics, what I do is I typically go back 4 or 5 months on a date range. So in this case, I've selected March 1st to July 31st. And then what I do is I go over to the overview on traffic sources, all traffic under sources. And then what I like to do is actually just see the traffic by medium. I'm clicking on medium here. So this gives me a good, the good solid buckets of what traffic's coming from organic, what traffic is coming from paid search, what traffic's coming from direct, which is also indicated here as none, and then what's coming in from referrals. So this is usually where I start, and I take this data and I translate it into this slide over here. So I see that there are 24,000 total visits, which I put as sort of the main bucket here, and then where that's coming from is it's coming 13,000 or 54% is coming from organic, 33%, in this case 8,000 is coming from PayPerClick, 6% referrals, and 7% direct. The other thing I do is I always look, because usually we're sort of inheriting this Google Analytics account, and I always look to see which goals might be set up. So in this case, I'm going to scroll up to the top and click on Goal Set 1. And fortunately, this client actually has their lead thank you page set up as a goal. So in this case, I'm lucky because I actually even have, in this case, 5 months of conversion data. So I can see conversion rate by source. So I also usually plug that in. So you can see here that overall they have a 4.13% conversion rate, and their organics converting at 2%, PayPerClick at 8%, referrals at 3%, and direct at 3.25. Usually, most people, when you sit down with them and show them this data in this way, this is something new. They've maybe plugged in Google Analytics, someone told them to put it on there, but they usually haven't seen the data simplified into this type of slide, and this is usually very interesting for people to talk about. From here, what I would probably mention in a meeting with a client is that, hey, it's very interesting that you've got a lot of traffic coming off of PayPerClick, but you're not converting it at a very high rate, only 2%. So that's something we're definitely going to want to talk more about. That traffic is coming from organic, and you're only converting it at 2%. at the same time, I would say, hey, look, it looks like you're doing a pretty good job at pay-per-click at 8%. What's different about that? How is there a way we can learn some lessons from what you're doing in pay-per-click and apply it to some of these other sources? And then I probably would also mention that, hey, it's great that you have 6% of your traffic coming in from referrals. We're going to want to take a look at that and understand where it's coming from and if there's anything we can do to boost that up. And then from this particular slide, really this kind of sets up the whole online marketing recommendation document that I'm going to take you through, because basically what I'm going to do now is just take us through each one of these buckets and talk about what things can we do, different online marketing tactics to either improve it, start it, in this case maybe there's not much social going on, or not, we don't know, we haven't gotten there yet, but that's how I usually set this up.
We have one very pragmatic question come in chat for you. Here it is. Is it easy for a client to allow you access to their Google Analytics?
Yes, it is. We can take a look at that really fast here. So any client, well, there's two ways. One is they can obviously just give you their username and password to log in. Sometimes that's also their email address, which is probably not a great thing to get access to. But if you tell them to log in, they'll see in the top toolbar here the admin buttons. If they click admin, then there's the ability right here to click on users. And then this is where they can actually add access to use by clicking new user. And then if you give them your email address that you use for Google Analytics, they can add you right in here. And unlike Google AdWords, which requires, you can only have really access to one AdWords account at a time, Google Analytics is great because if you have one main Google Analytics account, you can actually have access to multiple properties. Okay, so going to the next slide here, the next thing I do is this is where I start using our web grader. So now I want to dig in a little bit more on that organic search traffic and get a better sense for how does this compare to the competitors. So I know that this particular firm has two different practice areas. One is they do Social Security disability, and then they also do veterans disability. So in this case, I've created two slides, but this first one's looking at their Social Security competitors. So I know also from talking to them before going in and meeting with them that they have two people that they consider their competitors. One of them is Bender & Bender, which is a advertises nationally, and then the other one is a very big local competitor that does, and I should say Bender & Bender just does Social Security, and then another firm, Morgan & Morgan, does a whole range of different types of law, but they primarily focus in the Central Florida area where Hill and Pont is located. So I pull up the two analyses, and I'm like, wow, this is great, because you see here that both Bender & Bender and For the People, or Morgan & Morgan, have significantly bigger organic traffic, are driving significantly more organic traffic. So that's sort of an initial cue to say, okay, well, what are some of the things we can do to increase that? Now, I did take a closer look, and it's not included in this analysis, but it turns out that a big part of the Bender & Bender traffic is since they advertise nationally, their branded term actually gets quite a bit of traffic, and the cost per click on that is relatively high. So a big chunk of their traffic is coming in off their brand terms. For the People is actually, if you look a little closer at the keywords, they rank on a lot of different medical malpractice related keywords, so that have an average cost per click in the $50 and $60 range. So again, if you compare, it's not a great comparison because they do a lot more different types of law, but it does give a good indicator that relative to these guys, the value of your organic traffic is lower. From a domain authority standpoint, they have a healthy domain authority. They're 43, so is Bender & Bender. For the People website is higher. And then from a linking standpoint, they're a little behind Bender & Bender, and quite a bit behind forthepeople.com. So it just gives them a stat that we can talk through value of organic traffic, and this leads into why they need to do more with SEO, or what some of the tactics that they might be interested in are, what that they should be looking at are.
Yeah, those are some fairly motivating numbers right there.
Yeah, so the next slide is actually then taking that and comparing it to some people who they compete with on the veteran side. So there's veteranslaw.com and 2keller.com. And again, I always dig in a little bit. I didn't include it in this deck, but I typically look at the other keywords, and there might be some observations that I would want to make. In this case with 2keller, again, this firm does a lot of things other than veterans law, so it's not a great apples-to-apples comparison, because they, again, are in medical malpractice and a bunch of different other areas of law with some very high keyword values. So their veterans-only words may be closer to what Hill & Ponton is doing. And then veterans law, you can see here, is primarily targeted just at veterans. So this would also just give an idea of the range and how their organic traffic might compare to other people in the industry. And again, my experience with this is that people tend to look at this and say, okay, well, yeah, we thought they had better rankings than us. We just didn't really know how to evaluate it. So this is great that you're giving us a way for us to put a number to it so that we can see that, yeah, this thing is worth, their traffic is worth 4 or 5 times what our traffic's worth. What do we need to do to fix that? Or in some cases they may say, hey, they probably spend 10 times as much money as us on advertising. We just don't have those kinds of budgets. So we may not ever be able to match their traffic, but we'd at least like to be smart about improving whatever traffic we can with the budgets that we have. So that also is a pretty common scenario that we run into when comparing competitors. Okay, the next thing that I like to look at is actually within the traffic, going back to analytics. So let's pull this up. Going back over to analytics, inside search, and I click on organic. And then what I want to do is I kind of want to look at what kind of keyword, how many keywords and how much traffic are they getting from that organic, from organic traffic. So in this case, I know they have the 12,859 coming in from organic search. But what I'm also interested in is how many keywords are leading in the last 5 months are actually contributing to that 12,859. If you look over here in the right-hand corner, what it's showing you is that there are actually 7,401 keywords that actually are driving those nearly 13,000 visits. So just, what that means here is that you can see the drop-off is pretty fast, right? I mean, they have their branded term, and they have a couple branded terms. They have a few types of veterans' disabilities that they work a lot with, and they've written a lot of content on their website about. But then pretty quickly, I think by the time you even get to page 2 or 3, let's just look at this. We're on page 2, 3. So by the time you get to page 4, or let's say 5, by the time you get to page 6, you're down to keywords that have 10 hits over the course of 5 months. So really, like, what I like to mention there is that, hey, you really do have a long tail program running here, and that's has a lot to do with, in this case, the fact that they've done a lot of blogging, and they've picked up a lot of longer tail conversational terms that are driving that search traffic. So that's something that I would want to mention and say what you're doing is actually working pretty well, because your long tail is looking really good. We probably want to look inside that long tail and figure out, are there places that we could actually get you some better rankings so that you would get some more head terms. So some of the long tail may be that, like, for example, look down on this page here. It might be that Daytona Beach law firms, might be that maybe they're in page 12, I'm sorry, in the position 12, so on page 2. So that might be one when we looked at it, we'd say, we only had 8 visits on that, but actually there are 100 searches a month. It's just that you're pretty low on the rankings, so let's see what we can do to move you up in the rankings. So there's kind of 2 stories in here. One is that they have a healthy long tail, but there also is opportunity in here to potentially push rankings up when we're looking for keywords that they might want to optimize on.
We sort of have a question, Chad, that's in the reverse for you here. How do you explain that some of my sites have traffic on terms that Google says has no monthly search volume?
Oh, that's a great question. And really, Google, a lot of times when they're reporting no monthly search volume, it's because of this exact issue. There's 5 or 10 searches a month, and so it's just not, there's not enough searches on that for Google to accurately report it. So a lot of times we see errors, especially on the lower search volume. Adam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because I know you look at this a lot too.
Yeah, well, I think it's the reason you should not ignore the long tail, and I know sometimes customers are very, very focused on their head terms and those ranking on those head terms, and it's easy to understand why when the percentages are there. We obviously get focused on those too, but you just can't overlook the fact that these long tails really do add up, and sometimes it's surprising, like this person saying in their question that they thought there'd be nothing or wouldn't expect there to be anything, and here were some very valuable clicks that trickled in. So I think that just speaks to casting a pretty broad net on these long tails.
Yeah, and I think the long tail is the stuff that we talk a lot about. Obviously, what's happening here, if you kind of go back and you look at this and you think about why does this site have a pretty good long tail, well, there's 2 reasons. One is they've done enough link building to build up a domain authority of 43 and a Moz rank of 5 on the homepage. And then the second thing they've done is they've been blogging for a couple years on the site, and they basically the strategy that we've told them to use is when you're on the phone with potential clients or with current clients, listen to what questions they have and use those frequently asked questions as blogging topics, and that's just what they've done. So they're out blogging on as different, a lot in the disabilities, the veterans disability side of their business. This is all about are veterans, do they have the right disability rating for their whatever their illness is. And so as the Veterans Administration changes the way they rate different cases, there's sort of a whole new opening that happens with those types of cases. So in this case, Agent Orange and Parkinson's and a few other things are have been changed. They've written a lot of blogs on that, and there's a ton of veterans out searching for these issues because they have questions about their rating, and the domain authority of the website, along with the long tail blog content, is what's driving this long tail. Okay. So I guess the point here is that, yeah, domain authority helps you on the head terms. So that link building on the head terms helps, and that's critical. But the other side benefit is that you do get the long tail along with it. So next, I took a look at PayPerClick. I didn't spend a lot of time on this one again, but one of the interesting facts from our initial slide was that the conversion stats for PayPerClick were the highest of any source. So that, if you remember, if we go back to that first slide here, we're talking about PayPerClick in this bucket, about 33% of their traffic coming in off PayPerClick with a 7.9% conversion rate. So for any of you out there who have tried PayPerClick, on lead gen, their primary call to action is a free case evaluation. That's a pretty good conversion rate. So they're doing okay on PayPerClick. Now, but we might say, well, could they do better? Because there are many sites out there with higher conversion rates than 8%. And what I thought about as I looked at this is, what if you weren't ready for a case evaluation? What if you just had a question about the case and you needed some more information before you're ready to actually fill out a lengthy contact form? So maybe there's an opportunity here to change up the landing page. Now, the slide I have on the right is their landing page, or the picture I have on the right is their landing page. It's a little text heavy. There's not a lot of visual stuff going on. There's a video on the right, but maybe they could make this look a little nicer, and maybe they could have a secondary call to action, which is if you weren't ready for a case evaluation, maybe there's some type of ebook you can download. So again, taking this back to the meeting, at this point, my experience with this type of analysis is that you've already sort of impressed the prospect by digging into their data, and now you're just having a dialogue and discussions. And the conversation, in my experience, is very easy at this point because I'm not even selling them anything yet. In fact, they can't quite, the times I've done this, most people actually are having a hard time at this point trying to figure out, like, is this guy selling me something or not, because he's giving me all this really valuable information. And so when I took a client through a very similar exercise, at this point they're saying, this is great information. In fact, our last company or our current company has never even told us any of this stuff. So this is great. What can we do to fix this? Because we've been thinking the same thing. That's really the point of taking the time on these bigger engagements to go through and do a more detailed analysis. So that's what we're doing here.
And one question that came in for you, Chad, on the conversion rate discussion is there a good standard to use when evaluating a conversion rate? You know, if I'm looking at something that's 2% or 8%, is that good? Any guidelines you can give us?
Yeah, that's sort of, I think there's a couple of blog posts I've written on that on the blog, but that's a pretty frequently asked question. There isn't one number. It always depends on the call to action and what the hurdle is for the person to actually complete that action. So for example, if you're an e-commerce site, most e-commerce sites are really happy if they can get a 3% conversion rate. If you're again, a free informational asset, then you want to be up in the 8-9% range. This site, for what they're asking, I mean, they're asking for a pretty, you give all your service information or your Social Security disability information, so it's a fairly detailed form that you complete. And they're actually, on the Social Security side, is a sort of a navigation step that, depending on your answers, it takes you to some outcomes where they say, hey, we can't even help you. So 8% for them is very good, but it really depends on the customer and what they're looking for. And I will say that whenever you start a project, the conversion rate, usually once you get focused on it, you can usually get it up from whatever it is, because a lot of times we'll start with a lead site with a 2% conversion rate, and by coming up with the right set of informational assets or other things, we can usually get that up to 5 or 6% without too much trouble. And then to finish that off, the one final point is that there are we have one customer that's in the moving and storage business, and because of just the nature of their business, when people are coming to their website, they're looking for a price, and their conversion is to fill out an online web quote form that gives you an online price. And so their conversion rate may be 30%, because just the intent of the person coming, and the barrier they're putting in front of them, which is, hey, just tell us where you want to move and what you want to use this for, and we'll give you a price. Their conversion rate may be 30 to 40%. Okay, so the other thing I noticed when I looked at the PayPerClick campaign was that they really weren't using all the ad extension options. So there was limited use of the Google Local ad extension, limited use of mobile options, limited use of the call-only mobile ad extension, and then they weren't using the location-based bidding. So there are this particular firm advertises across the Central Florida area, but their home market is Orlando. And so, there may be some thought they may want to experiment with bidding up people who are closer to their home office compared to people who may be, 20 or 30 miles away, and there may be other people who are closer that they would be more apt to go to. Okay, so as we continue again through our different traffic buckets, we've gone through organic and pay-per-click, and now we're on to referral. So what I did here is also in Google Analytics. I'm going to pull that up. I went in and I went to again under traffic sources, referrals, and I just took a screenshot of their top 10 traffic sources. And again, I did this in a pretty quickly for today, but I did, if you look at these, you'll see that what tends to be popping up are that their directories and resource sites are driving referrals. So you see lawyers.com, they do have an ad on that, veteransinfo.org. They've got NASCAR.org, which is the Social Security claimants representatives. It's a national association. And then they have attorneysforveterans.com. So one of the things that I would recommend by looking at this is, hey, are there ways that you could actually go to these websites and increase your presence? So could you advertise on the website? Or maybe you have a profile there that's just been set up in its basic format, and you could go in and enhance that. Or if some of these places have forums, would this be a great place to, or community areas, is this a place that maybe you should try to spend some time in the forum communicating and providing feedback or information to people who are on this website? So those are all things you could do. The other thing you might want to look at is what are the keywords that these websites rank on, because maybe you could take some of the ways they're getting traffic to their website and replicate them on yours, whether that's through pay-per-click or SEO or maybe some of the social tactics they're using. So that's how I look at referral, because referrals are often overlooked because people just sort of say, well, those are hard to get. I don't know how you get the referrals to your website. But usually this is what I find, is that there's some that people don't even really think about that are actually driving more traffic than they realized. And there may be a way to make that even a bigger number if they just spend some time expanding their relationship with those sites. And again, to put this in perspective, you're having this nice friendly conversation with a potential client, and they've never even seen this before. So they're like, wow, I knew we had a link on such and such site, but I didn't realize that we were getting, in this case, these aren't very big numbers. Other ones I've done are bigger, but I didn't realize we've gotten 150 leads out of lawyers.com or 150 visits out of lawyers.com. We were thinking about canceling our contract with them or canceling our profile on their website. So at least this gives them perspective. Okay, the next thing that I'm doing here is this is a quick look at Google+, but I do think that Google+ is a great way to enhance your organic results. So this might go a little bit more with organic, but I've got it in this section. So I noticed that in looking at their Google+ pages that they hadn't really claimed any of them, and they have 3 different office locations. None of them have been claimed, and so my recommendation here is, hey, you're underutilizing Google+, and in this particular case, they also are not on Facebook or Twitter, so there might be a bigger social play that they should be going after to try to participate from a social media standpoint. The next thing that I went through is I always like to look at their website, and again, in just making my own observations, I try to be pretty objective about this and not too salesy, but you know, the website looks good, but maybe it's a little dated. They might be able to snazz the design up a tad. It's got some dark background colors, so is there something they could do to make it a little bit more up to date? Again, want to talk about the primary call to action here. Their primary call to action is a case evaluation, and this is kind of a recurring theme throughout this presentation is, are there other calls to action that they should be considering? Sort of a one-trick pony right now. It's basically read my content or get a free case evaluation. They do have some good educational video content, so there's a video intro on the homepage, and there's also a veterans overview video as well as a Social Security overview video. So they are using video, which is good. There's no social network integration, so I would like to see a Google Plus widget and a Facebook widget on the site in some way, just because we want to continue to be ready for whatever social signals get built in at some point into the search algorithms. Better to start laying the groundwork now than later. And then, as I said before, if you're not ready for a case evaluation, what are some of the other things that you might want to, actually I have something I didn't delete there, but what are some other things that you could do? Like, for example, download an ebook on the 3 things you should know about filing a Social Security claim or the veterans claim. Those are all topics that might be useful. The next couple slides are one of my favorite selling points because these always shock people. This is always a great one to include, even if you're not planning on building a mobile website. But you always say, did you realize that 13% of your traffic is coming in off mobile devices? And if you look at, I also included the conversion rate. So of those 3,000 visitors, only 2% converted, whereas overall for non-mobile devices, that's at 4.42%. Now, in this particular case, this client does actually see visitors in their office, so more than likely the people using mobile devices are trying to get address and directions as they're on the way to the office. But these are good things to remember. And then my very favorite next slide is, what does your website look like compared to your competition? So if you use HowToGoMo, and also I'll show you how to do this real quick if you haven't already done this, howtogomo.com. This is a Google site, and there's a link here, test your site. And so it's kind of cool. You can just plug in the website right here and click test your website, and it takes a few seconds here, but eventually what happens is it pops up with a little mobile simulated or simulated mobile device with what your website looks like, and you can see that the website is not optimized for mobile at all. Even better is to stick right next to it one of their competitors. So here's that For the People website, the the big Orlando or large law firm out of Orlando, and you can see that their mobile website is very much oriented around contacting office locations and a little bit on attorneys, and also then main call to action is to call Morgan & Morgan. So Hill & Ponton may want to consider something similar for people who are trying to find their office or just need to get in touch with them, and giving them a simple way to do that. Okay, so then we're in the home stretch of the online marketing analysis. At this point, your prospect is just drooling over how smart you are, and is basically has their checkbook on the desk and is ready to start writing a check. So you just need to finish this up, and you're on your way to riches. So basically, at this point, I always like to sort of come back to what makes a marketing program work. And I always say that it's smart traffic generation. So, generating traffic to generate traffic is not really the name of the game here. We want qualified visitors on our website. I could care less whether I have, 1 million visitors a month or 1,000 if both of them turn into 500 leads, right? So, maybe I care a little bit about that difference, but at the end of the day, what we really want is leads, and I think most people understand that. So, really, if you get that traffic and you have a simple value prop and call to action, then ultimately you're going to be generating opportunities online. And so really, if you think about that, these are the two main levers that we all can work with potential clients. Is we can drive traffic for you, and then we can help you on that conversion side by either writing good content on your website, helping you set up email nurturing programs, and other things to turn those visitors into leads, and of course track them. So the recipe for success in a lot of cases with online marketing is that everyone's kind of used to the good old days of saying, if I just focus on the people who already know they need me, that's all I should be doing, right? So it's just focus on people searching for a Social Security lawyer, and that's going to get you so far. But I think what I a lot of times try to do with the idea of weaving in content marketing and how content marketing can help your business is we need to get you to focus on moving up in the decision process. So I have a good example here at the bottom here where we talk about, if you think about someone who normally is looking for a Social Security lawyer or a veterans lawyer, the first thing where this always starts is, I can't work, I've been fired, I can't do the job like I used to, I think I'm disabled. So then they basically are on the web looking at trying to figure out what options exist for someone who's disabled. What are the government programs that help me? Who are the veterans resource groups out there that can help me out? At some point in doing that research, they realize that they either need disability insurance benefits, or they need a different disability rating from the Veterans Administration in this particular case. And then the question is, now who can help me? So if you only focus on the who can help me, there are a lot of people upstream that a lot of places they're going, well, let's put it this way, those terms are the most competitive and they also cost the most. And there are lots of cases where that's where you should focus. But there's also a good opportunity if they were to move upstream a little bit. And then if you looked at that SEO traffic they had with that low conversion rate. So they had a lot of SEO traffic, organic traffic, but a relatively low conversion rate. This is where, and for the most part, a lot of those terms are people in the research and need identification stage. If they were to create some other calls to action and some informational assets that they could get people to download, they could start to build a list and nurture those people through email marketing, retargeting, and other ways that when that person was ready to search for the solution, they would sort of already have the answer in front of them. So that's really the point here that I would make with these guys, and this is, you've primed the pump. We're going to help you get the traffic, but hey, we're also going to help you on the website call to action stuff, so that, and the nurturing, so that with the HubShout software, our online marketing, web presence development, you get that sort of online marketing program that everyone really wants. Okay. Two more things that I would end up with this particular conversation. One would be other tactics for driving traffic, or just talking about the tactics for driving traffic. So, of course, we have search engine optimization. We always like to point out that SEO will have the best ROI over the long term, but will take time to achieve the rankings that they want. PayPerClick is a great program to really identify opportunity to find keywords, test keywords, and try some of these upstream content ideas with informational downloads. The other thing I like to talk about is that we have had some great success with our larger advertisers using the Google Display Network. It's just a great way of getting in front of lots of people that aren't necessarily searching right now, but they may not know they need to search for a Social Security lawyer or a veteran's disability lawyer, but they are interested in topics that relate, and so it's a great way of getting in front of them. And then also social media is another good way to obviously increase your brand and to provide value out. So if people who aren't maybe searching or reading but are on Twitter or Facebook and looking for these types of topics, we can be there with the right things for them. And then we talked about the smart traffic generation, and then this is really tactics for converting traffic. So right call to action on your website, and then once someone does convert, you've built that list, the ability to nurture them through to actually making their decision to select you. So just to recap everything, someone called, we identified it as a potentially big lead, worth the time of putting in. In this case, this probably took me probably 45 minutes or an hour to put this together. I needed their Google Analytics. If you don't have Google Analytics, it's kind of hard to do this because you're guessing, and who wants to see a bunch of guesswork? So try to get the Google Analytics from the client, put this analysis together, and then go sit down in their office, show this to them. And like I said, my experience at least is that every time I've walked them through this, at least 80% of the time, maybe 90% of the time that I've walked someone through this, they may know some of this, but they don't ever see it put together in this package. And so, and through this framework, and this really is a framework for looking at traffic and conversion, the great thing about this framework is that this framework feeds you right into all the services that you can get through HubShout or that you may already be doing yourself.
Yeah, I agree. It's very well organized, Chad, and I think, as I've walked people through this stuff, they're pretty impressed. One question that came in while you were doing your summary recap was, is all of the information you've shown us in this PowerPoint from Google Analytics?
Everything is either from Google Analytics or from the research tab in your private label portal. So the SEO organic traffic values I pulled in from the research tab. And I should just show you really fast what I usually do there is if I'm trying to figure out which terms to use or which competitors to use. Pulling this up real fast. So if I wasn't able to get from the client some competitors to benchmark against, what I usually do, and we've talked about this in the past, is I'll just put in their website. I'll either look in Google Analytics at some terms that have a lot of traffic, or I'll pull up a research report here. And then what I'll do is so I've run a report just on Hill and Pond. Let's just say they didn't tell me that Morgan & Morgan and Binder were their competitors. So I will then run the full keyword analysis. I would sort on searches, so I want to see which terms are the head terms with the most searches. I would see something like Social Security attorneys or attorney. I'd probably grab that, and then I would just do a search for that. And I would more than likely, I mean, in this case, I would find some of these other sites here, Social Security lawyers. I think actually when I did it before, I did Social Security lawyers. Let's try that one. That's how I got Binder. Yeah, so as I was searching through here, I saw some of these bigger firms. Here's Binder, Packard Law. I clicked through a couple of these just to see which ones were national versus local, and then what I would do is add them into the comparison. So once I had that information, then that's where I would generate the research report and plug that in. And usually, if you get it wrong, usually what would happen is if someone said, well, hey, these are actually, could you do the same thing for, or this is what people would typically say is, hey, Binder is actually not my competitor, but these two guys are. I would love it if you could actually update this with those two guys in the report. And I say, awesome, I've got now a reason to call you back. You're engaged, so I take that note, and I'm more than happy to go back to the office, rerun the report, plug those in, and get a follow-up, sort of an automatic follow-up with you. So that even if you didn't have the right competitors, you've got a good reason to get back in touch with them.
Cool.
Okay, well, I think what I would like to do is I will just make this PowerPoint available through your account managers, so they will have this. I will post it to them right immediately after this meeting, and if any of you would like to get in touch and get a copy of this presentation, feel free to get in touch with your account manager. Otherwise, thanks very much for attending the webinar today, and we will talk to you next time.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and I hope this was really helpful. It's good talking to you. Take it easy.